Part 19. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mocienu. Chapter 181. At dusk, in the ruins of a human restricted area marked on a map somewhere. The roar of zombies and some strange buzzing sounds spread throughout the city, and the dim city was completely covered in blood. Roar. Suddenly, a roar of a beast exploded in the silent city like thunder from the ground. Countless zombie monsters were attracted by this roar full of violence, and drove towards the source of the sound with a low roar in their throats. But suddenly, a powerful energy wave came from a distance. The strong wind that came with it even made a tornado-like whistling sound. In a flash, a huge white shadow rushed from a distance like a meteorite. The next moment, the huge white shadow had already rushed straight to the center of the zombie group. There was a loud bang like a meteorite falling to the ground, and the solid ground was instantly smashed into a huge hole by the huge body. Hundreds of zombies were affected by the residual power of the earthquake, and their skin and flesh were torn apart in an instant. Some low-level zombies were directly shattered into pieces and turned into a pool of blood. When the smoke and dust dissipated, the terrifying existence in the deep pit was gradually exposed. This was actually a white tiger with black patterns on its abdomen and limbs. The eyes of the white tiger with red eyes were red, and its body was huge. It exuded an extremely majestic and terrifying aura. www. The bloody mouth of the white tiger with red eyes was already biting the bodies of several zombies. With a short low hum, the huge white tiger with red eyes looked up to the sky and swallowed. Several high-level zombies with strong strength in this area were swallowed up in an instant. The red-eyed white tiger was obviously not satisfied after swallowing a few zombies. It bent its hind legs and swooped down again. The hard ground was violently impacted by this huge body, leaving a deep gully. The broken limbs of zombies were scattered on both sides of the street, and the hot blood flowed on the ground to form a shallow river. At this time, there was no zombie heretic figure on the surrounding streets. The high-level zombies in this area already had a certain instinct to avoid danger. These zombies were all subdued by the majestic momentum of the white tiger with hanging eyes, and they fled out of this area driven by the instinct of fear. The white tiger with hanging eyes was originally crawling on the ground, gnawing at the corpse of a huge mutant zombie with its sharp teeth. But the next moment, it seemed to sense something and suddenly raised its head to look at the tall building in the distance. The white tiger's red eyes became deeper and deeper, and the next second, its huge figure rushed towards the distance like thunder and lightning. With one leap, it actually jumped dozens of meters into the air. Just as the huge body of the debouching white tiger was about to fall on the roof, an amazing scene happened. The body of the debouching white tiger was actually twisted and folded in the air, gradually turning into a 3-meter-tall human figure, with only the head still a tiger's face. In an instant, the debouching white tiger, which was as big as a truck, had turned into a strange image of a tiger head and a human body, with only the eyes still red, implying a violent meaning. As soon as the white tiger landed on the roof, it looked in a certain direction under its feet, grinned and said, "You humans are really hypocritical and insidious. You have been watching here for so long. Do you also want to learn from me to taste fresh flesh and blood?" I saw that a short rag doll with the image of a prince wearing a crown appeared on the eaves under the white tiger's feet. A ray of black light suddenly flashed in the button eyes of the rag doll, and a vague electronic voice came out of its mouth. "Tiger, don't confuse me with lowly humans." The rag doll in the image of a prince suddenly turned 180 degrees and said to the back, "You called us together, so you should show up too, right?" As soon as the voice fell, a figure of a purple-robed man appeared in the void in front of the rag doll. "Hee, I've kept you waiting for a long time." The voice of the purple-robed man seemed extremely empty, as if he was a terminally ill patient. At this moment, a purple shadow passed through the sky, and a huge human-faced poisonous moth flew from the sky in the distance. As the moth flapped its wings, purple powder scattered in the air. The terrifying thing is that no matter the body parts or steel and glass on the ground, they were corroded by strong sulfuric acid the moment they touched the purple powder, and there was no body left. Haha, the envoy of the heterogeneous religion has come to visit us. I am sorry for not welcoming you. The strange thing is that the face of the purple moth vaguely looks like a human woman, and even the voice it makes is as charming as a woman. Lord Moth King, you are too kind. The purple-robed man lowered his head, and his words were still weak. At this time, the tiger-faced white tiger said, "Has the human base started to move?" The purple-robed man said, "Yes, the three bases have reached an agreement to form a coalition to carry out a cleanup operation on more than a dozen surrounding cities." Haha, humans are indeed a low-level race with bad roots. They are still daydreaming at this point. The white tiger showed a humanized grin on his face, and his mouth was wide open, revealing sharp teeth stained with blood. It seems that it is our turn to give them some surprises. The enchanting voice of the strange-faced poison moth echoed on the rooftop, enchanting and with a touch of terrifying weirdness. Only the short rag doll in the shape of a prince sitting in the corner of the eaves remained silent. After a while, a dark light flashed in the eyes of the rag doll. "After the matter is done, I want the souls of those humans." "You kid, your appetite is a bit big, right?" The eyes of the hanging white tiger were fierce, and it was not only eating fresh flesh. Compared with these soulless and rotten zombies, it prefers to devour those human awakeners with fresh bodies and strong souls. A strong energy wave suddenly emanated from the rag doll's body, rushing straight to the bottom of the heart. However, the purple moth hovering in the sky did not look anxious at all, and there was a faint sound of a woman snickering. Seeing that the situation was about to get out of control, the purple-robed man said repeatedly, "You two should be patient, the Holy Church will definitely give you a satisfactory answer." Hearing the purple-robed man take out the name of the alien church, the two monsters calmed down their anger. For the mysterious and powerful alien church, these destructive-level strongmen also feel daunted. The purple-robed man did not say anything more. There was no point in saying more about the existence of these monsters. The best way was to trade with them by offering fundamental benefits. The purple-robed man of the heterogeneous religion, the white tiger with a tiger head and a human body, the strange rag doll with the image of a prince, and the strange-faced poisonous moth with a human head and a moth body. The four parties discussed something together, and finally, with the sunset, the sun was about to fall below the horizon. In the twilight, a woman's sweet laughter that went straight to the soul could be heard. "I am looking forward to the pathetic self-salvation of the fragile humans. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord." Author, Mocnu. Chapter 182. The long silent earth suddenly shook violently, followed by a humming sound from afar. As the vibration became more and more intense, the rubble on the ground jumped up under the huge force. On the horizon several kilometers away from the ruins of the city, a row of obviously modified car engines gushed out, driving towards this terrifying human-restricted area like a steel monster. The outermost was a row of military green Hummer military vehicles, with shining gun barrels on the roof. The air was already filled with some invisible gunpowder. However, as the humming of the engine became clearer and clearer, it was possible to see that the number of this convoy in the distance was even more terrifying. From a distance, at least thousands of modified cars of various shapes were rushing towards the edge of the city like beasts. And behind these groups of vehicles, followed by hundreds of tall mechas covered with steel armor, holding guns and weapons, and tens of meters in size. Countless zombie monsters in the city center were stimulated by the violent noise made by the convoy. They all showed ferocious faces and waved their claws to attack the convoy. Roar. The low roar from the throat came from the depths of the city, forming a sharp contrast with the vibration from the Mercedes convoy in the distance. The convoy of thousands of people instantly broke through the edge of the city, and in the blink of an eye, it collided with the oncoming group of corpses. The huge group of corpses surrounded the convoy of thousands of people. In an instant, the sound of flesh tearing and blood splattering continued to come from the group of corpses like an old phonograph. The air gradually filled with a strong smell of blood, and the broken limbs and arms were splashed all over the ground. One by one, the thick wheels that had been modified rolled over the blurred flesh of the zombies, and instantly rushed out a gap in the group of corpses. The next moment, the flat ground suddenly bulged, and a huge centipede with a body length of several feet jumped out of the ground like a ground dragon turning over. The mutant centipede directly knocked over a truck, and then struggled with its tentacles to bite the car on the other side crazily. At this moment, there was a burst of swoosh sound. Dozens of lasers shot from a distance in a flash. The huge body of the mutant centipede was instantly pierced by the hot blue lasers, leaving countless bloody holes. The mutant centipede screamed in pain and fell to the side. Then, a narrow and long mechanical sword broke through the air and chopped the mutant centipede's body in two in an instant. Blood spurted out like a fountain, and this scene also stunned the humans in the surrounding UA base. They didn't expect that these tall mechas were so lethal that they could destroy such a terrifying A-level monster in just a few breaths. Is this the power of technology? The human side didn't have time to be shocked, because there were still countless zombie monsters around rushing towards the direction of the convoy. Captain. In a military vehicle, a member of the guard team shouted to Wei Ying, who was wearing special uniforms. Wei Ying looked calm, and he was not panicked even when he was surrounded by zombies. He slowly turned on the intercom connected to the whole team and said, "Missile launch." Countless gun barrels rose above hundreds of military vehicles, and with a loud bang, countless missiles with flames burst out from the sky above the convoy. The huge missiles shot towards the zombies in front like dense rain. The moment they touched the ground, the missiles exploded, and countless zombie monsters were annihilated in this shocking explosion. The smoke produced by the explosion rolled, and it covered the line of sight in an instant. Then, Wei Ying in the car changed the intercom to another channel. "Captain He, it's time to start." The voice of He Anping came from the intercom. "Okay." Almost at the moment when Wei Ying hung up the intercom, hundreds of large mechas around the convoy suddenly moved. The energy tank on the chest of the mecha was running wildly, and violent flames were spewing out from under its feet, and the sound of mechanical operation was heard. In almost the blink of an eye, hundreds of mechas had rushed to the front line of the battle. Dense lasers shot out from the guns held by the black mechas. The scorching lasers seemed to be able to melt everything in the world, and the zombie monsters hit were torn apart and bloody. Some low-level zombies were instantly pierced through the vital parts of their heads by the overwhelming blue lasers, and they were dead. At this moment, less than 10 minutes from the start of the war, the land where the convoy was located was full of broken limbs and blurred flesh and blood, which was disgusting. However, many humans had no time to breathe, and the roars of the zombies and unknown monsters came from the depths of the city in front again. The battle will continue. At the same time, in the ruins of another city occupied by zombie monsters. The boiling flames spread all over the streets of the city, and even the surrounding houses were invaded by flames. The scorching heat set the air on fire, and the whole street seemed to be in a sea of fire. On the other side of the sea of fire, a group of gangsters wearing punk vests stood there blankly. The skin felt strangely burning, and the moisture in the air seemed to be evaporated. Then there was a series of swallowing sounds. "Boss, what happened?" The subordinates of the Shenlong Society stared at the center of the sea of fire in great horror. There, the back of a thin man can be vaguely seen. In the blazing fire, Wang Deipen stood alone in the center of the flames with his upper body bare. At this moment, his whole body seemed to be stained by the flames, showing a hot red color. On his back, a red dragon tattoo became more vivid, and a fierce flaming pressure burst out from his body. Not far from him, on the ground, there were charred corpses whose faces could no longer be seen, piled up like a hill. Wang Deipen seemed to be bathing in magma, and his body was full of crimson cracks like volcanic lava. The destruction level guardian called Scorching Sun lowered his head, and his eyes were filled with an inexplicable anger. A deep voice came out from between his teeth. Shura. As the name of Shura came out of Wang Deipen's mouth, the fiery cracks on Wang Deipen's body became deeper. After leaving the human base, Wang Deipen's emotions were most directly vented. Master, the nearest city is not far ahead. Similarly, on the edge of a ruined city, a huge convoy of thousands of people was speeding on the road. Zhang Qinggui, dressed in casual clothes, sat in a luxury car, and next to him sat a short monk in a Taoist robe. The man dressed as a monk was one of the three destructive guardians of Yuhei base, the strange monk Wufa. Wufa closed his eyes and chanted an unknown Buddhist name. It was not until Zhang Qinggui's flattering words came that Wufa responded symbolically. Zhang Qinggui was no longer surprised by Wufa's cold attitude, but instead pinched his rosary with a flattering look on his face. The convoy was moving at a high speed, and behind the car where Zhang Qinggui and Wufa were, there was a huge truck covered with some kind of hard metal. There was a faint roar of some monster coming from the truck, and the metal plates supporting the truck kept making strange sounds of slapping and bombarding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 183. While multiple teams were fighting fiercely in major cities, Lannan City, which is closest to Yuhei base, also welcomed a large team of thousands of people. On the old road covered with traces of war, hundreds of modified cars were driving on it. Behind them were still hundreds of tall and mighty mecha giants. This is a high-tech product from Zilan base, and it also represents the latest masterpiece of mankind in combat. And the power of each mecha also comes from the mutant crystal core containing different energy. The requirements for the operator are also not high, and even ordinary humans can control these tall mechas after a period of training. Just these hundreds of mechas are enough to cross a city ruins full of dangerous zombies. Each mecha has a combat power at least comparable to that of a B-level awakener. And the production process of these cutting-edge high-tech equipment is strictly kept secret by Zilan base, and it is determined not to reveal a single bit. As a large base, the high-tech equipment produced and manufactured by Zilan base is only allowed to be exchanged between bases through crystal core resources. Even if the technology experts in other bases racked their brains, they could not crack the operation methods of these pioneering mechanical products of the times. Hundreds of vehicles of various shapes were driving on the road, rushing towards the city in front of them. The surrounding mecha warriors were like guards, following the convoy at a leisurely pace. Teacher, I have been driving for a day, how about you drive for a while? In one of the seemingly ordinary Jeep off-road vehicles, Lin Feng, wearing goggles, looked hopeless and turned to look at Mu Qiu lying on the co-pilot next to him. Lin Feng was also convinced. His teacher seemed to have known about this situation in advance and took him to take the driving test early. Finally, after scrapping more than a dozen cars, Lin Feng reluctantly learned to drive. But Lin Feng did not expect that the first thing he did after learning to drive was to act as a driver for Mu Qiu. Long-term driving had exhausted him physically and mentally, so he looked at Mu Qiu next to him with resentment. The latter lay down on the passenger seat, wearing a pair of sunglasses and blowing the wind leisurely. When Lin Feng's words came, Mu Qiu rested his chin by the car window and waved his hand indifferently. Young people should exercise more and keep driving. Lin Feng naturally sneered at Mu Qiu's remarks of lying down. In the back of the jeep, there were 4 girls sitting, Yui, Qinmendi, Su Wen, and Shueqianya. Among the 4 girls, only Su Wen looked a little nervous, holding the brown squirrel in her arms and watching the surrounding scene. After all, she had never experienced such a large-scale battle. Shwekinyanue beside her were expressionless, and there was no panic. Shwekinya's eyes were calm, as if the sky would not fall and her cold eyes would not make any waves. As for Yui, she looked around with a silly face, with curiosity in her eyes. Chinmendi, the smallest of the four, who was wearing a red Lolita dress, leaned against the car window like Muqiu, propped up her head, and raised an inexplicable smile at the corner of her mouth. The modified off-road vehicle had a much wider back seat, so it was not crowded even if 4 or 5 people sat there. According to Yuhai's plan, nearly 20,000 ordinary humans, including awakened ones and signs, would be dispatched. They were divided into 4 teams to carry out a cleanup operation in more than a dozen surrounding cities. He Anping from Weiying and Zilan base was in charge of 1 team, while Wang Daipen and Zhongqing were in charge of 1 team each. As for Muqiu, the person in charge of the team was the captain of the law enforcement team, Ji Yufeng, who was called the White Death. The members were mostly awakened ones from various search teams and some ordinary human guards who were temporarily recruited. The team of thousands of people quickly rushed along the road and rushed into the human restricted area in front of them. After 2 battles, the encirclement and suppression of the heterogeneous cult and the Awakener trial, most of the high-level zombies in Lannan City have been wiped out. The few remaining low-level zombies are not powerful enough and pose little threat to them. As expected, when hundreds of cars rushed into the city, the violent vibrations and noises instantly attracted the attention of many zombies. Groups of terrifying zombies rushed towards the convoy. But how could these low-level zombies with fragile bodies be the opponents of the modified steel beasts? The armored cars instantly crushed and hit the bodies of these cold-blooded monsters. Thick blood gathered on the ground, and a sea of blood and corpses appeared under the convoy in an instant. The zombies in Lannan City are obviously not as vast as those in other cities. They have already shown signs of decline under the impact of several waves of zombies. There were even few high-level zombies in the whole process, and the occasional attack of a few A-level zombies was also completely eliminated by the tall mecha warriors. After several rounds of battles, the bodies of many modified armored vehicles were stained with blood, and scratches and body parts were scattered around the bodies. However, no one died in the whole process, but several armored vehicles were scrapped due to excessive wear and tear. In just half a day, the convoy had rushed from the edge of the city to the most prosperous central street in Lannan City. Only when we arrived at this central street could we finally find the appearance of some high-level heretics. These sporadic monsters were obviously high-level beings that had newly spawned after the trial war. However, how could a few A-level zombie monsters be the opponent of thousands of human coalition forces? In just a quarter of an hour, the entire downtown street fell silent. And the convoy stopped. Many humans walked out of the car, and in an instant, thousands of human figures appeared on the empty street. The air was faintly filled with the smell of blood and the stench of corpses. Ji Yufeng, wearing a white suit, slowly walked out of a military vehicle in front of him. The short-haired woman standing next to him was Ji Yufeng's sister Ji Yu. As soon as he got off the car, everyone's eyes were focused on Ji Yufeng. Ji Yufeng first glanced in the direction of Muqiu, then looked around, and then slowly said, "Disperse on the spot according to the original plan and search the entire city. The main task is to search for survivors, mark resource areas along the way, and sound the alarm in case of emergency. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord." Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 184. The main purpose of this plan, codenamed Redemption, is to carry out a cleanup of dozens of urban areas around the 3-party base in the process of rescuing the Dongshan base. According to the original plan, the 4-party forces will carry out a large-scale cleanup of the zombies in the city, and these teams will only stay for a short time to search for some important resources. As for the subsequent finishing work, it will be carried out jointly by the 3 bases after the rescue operation is over. Among them, the human survivors in the city are naturally the primary target of their search. Of course, most people don't have much hope for finding survivors in the depths of such ruins. After all, in such a dangerous forbidden area full of medium and high-level zombies, the probability of human survival is too low. On weekdays, they mostly look for survivors in the relatively safe green and yellow zones. At Ji Yufeng's order, hundreds of vehicles of various shapes rushed towards all directions of the city. Mu Qiu and his party also got in the car and left, driving towards a certain direction in the city with Lin Feng's resentful look. The traffic was surging, and the zombies along the way could almost be described as sparsely populated. There were even more vehicles passing by than zombies. The decayed and desolate city and the streets with blood and corpses, the condensed smell of decay in the air became the main color of the city. The white Jeep off-road vehicle sped all the way and finally arrived in front of a large supermarket in the city. A voice suddenly came from behind. Mu Qiu. Some familiar voices sounded behind him, and Mu Qiu turned his head. But he found a fat man with several young children running towards Mu Qiu. Seeing this person, Mu Qiu's mouth twitched slightly. Fatty. The man in front of him turned out to be one of the members of Wei Ling'er's team before, a flexible fat man with super high-speed movement ability. Why are you everywhere? Mu Qiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why did he remember seeing this fat man at the scene of the last Awakener trial? Oh, doesn't this just show that we have a deep bond? The fat man enthusiastically came forward and greeted Mu Qiu in a familiar manner. Aren't you in Wei Ling'er's team? Why are you here again? The fat man looked bitter. The traitor Song Konghua in the original team died, Su Wen followed you and ran away, and the boss was taken by her brother to another city to clear out zombies, and even Lao Chen joined the law enforcement team. I had no choice but to temporarily form a team with these unwanted apprentices of mine to make a living. The fat man complained to Mu Qiu, describing his experience as extremely miserable, which made people cry. Su Wen, who was standing behind Mu Qiu, heard about the fat man's experience and stuck out her tongue a little embarrassedly. Mu Qiu shook his head with a smile on his face. The fat man was talking pitifully, and he must have spent all his money in that red light district again. Mu Qiu looked at the students behind the fat man who were about the same age as Lin Feng and the other two. The fat man's students all looked worried and looked around in panic, as if they were afraid that a terrible zombie monster would pop out from somewhere. Suddenly, Mu Qiu turned to look at his students and said with a smile, "It's just right, you can act together and take care of each other." Then he handed the communication device in his hand to Lin Feng. Lin Feng asked in confusion, "What about you, teacher?" Mu Qiu narrowed his eyes, smiled, and shook his finger. "I have a secret mission to do, so I'll leave first." "I don't believe you." Lin Feng looked at Mu Qiu with contempt, as he had memorized his teacher's routine. He must have taken advantage of their search time to go somewhere and lie down. Secret mission. The fat man didn't know the truth yet, and he touched the back of his head, feeling awe-inspiring. After all, he is a big shot among the awakened, and he has a special mission. Mu Qiu had a gentle face, and smiled at Qin Mendi and Yu Qi. "Wait for me here." Yu Qi nodded gently, and she would always execute Mu Qiu's requests unconditionally. The girl in a red dress pouted, but she stayed where she was and didn't follow. The autumn wind was bleak, and the breeze in autumn had brought a little chill. Mu Qiu, however, didn't care, wearing the black windbreaker, and walked leisurely on the deserted street. At a certain moment, Mu Qiu slowly walked into a deep alley in the street. The remote and dark alley was narrow and closed, and it was difficult for the light from outside to project in. Only the cool breeze with a chill blew into the alley, adding a bit of loneliness to it. Just as Mu Qiu stepped into the alley, a pair of bloodthirsty eyes suddenly opened in the depths of the alley. A gust of wind accompanied by a claw shadow flashing with cold light rushed towards Mu Qiu's face. With this extremely fast speed, even a B-level awakener would be hit. Mu Qiu still had a leisurely smile on his face like a stroll. For the oncoming swift attack, Mu Qiu slightly raised his hand and just caught the claw attacking in the air perfectly. The sharp claws could not break through the defense line of Mu Qiu's flesh palm. I saw the blue mist suddenly burst out from Mu Qiu's palm, and the gloomy cold air instantly filled the entire dark alley. And as the blue cold light flashed, the true face of the attacking monster finally appeared. This turned out to be a mutant jackal with a bloody mouth and a hideous face. A cold light flashed in Mu Qiu's palm, and in an instant, the short mutant cat was frozen into a ball of ice. Mu Qiu clenched his palm, and with a click sound, the ice wrapped around the mutant cat instantly shattered into a pile of debris. The pungent smell of rot and blood filled the air, but Mu Qiu remained motionless, with his back to the alley, squinting and smiling. "What do you want to find me for this time?" As Mu Qiu's voice fell, a purple ripple like water spread out at the alley entrance. A charming woman wearing a split red cheongsam and a hot body emerged from the alley entrance. The woman walked slowly towards Mu Qiu with a charming smile on her face, stepping lightly with her high heels, and a beauty mole under the corner of her eye added a bit of sexiness to her. "Master." The woman walked behind Mu Qiu, hugged Mu Qiu around the waist, her eyes rolling, her charming face leaned lightly on Mu Qiu's shoulder, and a few foxtails were looming behind her. Mu Qiu could even feel the extremely soft touch of the two balls on his back. Mu Qiu turned around, still narrowing his eyes and smiling. "I hope you brought some useful information." As Mu Qiu finished speaking, the enchanting woman could clearly feel that the temperature of the surrounding air had cooled down a bit. Not daring to make any more mistakes, the woman let go of her hands, looked at Mu Qiu with seductive eyes and said, "Of course I'm here to pass on information to you." The enchanting woman standing in front of Mu Qiu at this moment was the purple-robed member of the alien religion who was subdued by Mu Qiu not long ago, and the goddess figure in the Yuhei base, Lu Qianqian. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 185. Has the heterogeneous sect made any moves? Mu Qiu looked at Lu Qianqian calmly. He had already guessed that the heterogeneous sect would not sit back and relax when the three bases were making big moves. So he had long ago ordered Lu Qianqian to find out the intelligence of the heterogeneous sect and inform him in time. The fire he planted was hidden in Lu Qianqian's body, and even an existence of the same destructive level could not remove it. The only way to get rid of it was for Mu Qiu to lead the fire out himself, otherwise it would only stimulate the fire to explode in the body. Lu Qianqian was a smart woman, and she knew that at this time, she could only survive by relying on Mu Qiu. Tianlai Novel Network. Lu Qianqian's eyes were filled with resentment, as if she was blaming Mu Qiu for being cruel and not knowing how to cherish women. Being stared at by Mu Qiu's smiling eyes, Lu Qianqian shuddered and said in a tender voice, "I don't know what to do specifically, but the higher UPS asked the church believers hiding in the base to stay in the base as much as possible and wait for follow-up arrangements. Even some believers who were on missions outside were called back to the base. I also found an excuse that I couldn't shirk to participate in this battle. Most of the other believers stayed in the base." Lu Qianqian's eyes were watery, as if she had suffered a great injustice. "I risked being exposed to tip you off, but you treated me like this." Mu Qiu naturally ignored Lu Qianqian's drama, but instead stroked his chin and fell into deep thought. It stands to reason that the heterologian church would definitely take action in such a big battle, but now it is such a wait-and-see attitude, which is worth pondering. Mu Qiu suddenly remembered that Lu Qingfei's fiancé had said that the heterologian church and Dyer had an agreement. "I can ask Dyer if she knows any secrets." "I know." Mu Qiu thought for a moment, nodded slowly, and left in the direction of the alley without looking back. Stinky straight man. Lu Qianqian had never seen a man as unromantic as Mu Qiu, and she was so angry that she chopped her feet. Seeing that Mu Qiu was about to leave, Lu Qianqian had no time to get angry, and she accelerated her high heels to follow him. In the corner in front of a large shopping mall, the fat man twisted his body and poked his head out of the corner. He looked around for a while, then he breathed a sigh of relief and said to the back, "It's hit, come out." Several students of the fat man walked out of the dark with strange expressions, speechless. "Teacher, is it really like this? Remember the last trial was like this." Several students were also quite speechless about the fat man as a teacher. "What do you know?" The fat man shouted in a low voice, "I am a fat man who cherishes my life. If I hadn't let you, you would have died a long time ago." Hearing the fat man's angry rebuke, several students dared not say anything more. The students were just complaining as usual, but they were actually very grateful for the fat man's care. Just then, a figure was faintly approaching from the street in the distance. The fat man immediately led several students back like a frightened bird. After seeing that the person coming was Mu, the fat man breathed a sigh of relief and walked out of the corner. But when he saw a pair of delicate jade hands around Mu's arm, the fat man was not calm again. When Mu and the others came to the front, the fat man finally saw the owner of the jade hands, who was the dream lover of countless men in Yuhei base Lu Qianqian. Mu impatiently pulled out his hand, but Lu Qianqian, who had a charming figure and a charming face, was not disgusted at all, and looked like a crazy obedient girl. You guys." The fat man's eyes popped out immediately, and he wiped his eyes in disbelief, looking at the scene in front of him. Lu Qianqian took the lead in explaining, "I just got separated from the team, and happened to meet Lord Bingjun who passed by and rescued me." After that, she looked at Mu with affection. "I am really grateful." The fat man's breathing stagnated instantly, and he pulled Mu aside. "I can't believe it, Mu, when did you get Lu Qianqian?" Mu smiled bitterly, "What are you talking about? I'm not that familiar with her." The fat man stretched his neck and whispered in Mu's ear, "I heard that this Lu Qianqian was a popular online anchor before the end of the world, and was sought after by thousands of people. It is rumored that Zhang Qinggui wanted to support her, but this lady disdained it." The fat man cast an envious look at Mu. "Lu Qianqian is the dream lover of countless men in our base. I didn't expect that this delicate flower would be picked by you. We are all brothers. Can you tell me what secrets you have to pick up girls?" Mu was amused by the fat man's antics. He shook his head, looked around, and asked with a smile, "Where are Yue and Dyer? Why don't I see Linfeng and the others?" Hearing Mu's question, the fat man came back to his senses instantly and stammered. They just received a distress signal from a few kilometers away, and they are probably rushing over now." Mu nodded indifferently. With Dyer by his side, Yue would naturally not be hurt. Mu looked at the fat man, "Then why don't you go?" The fat man was stunned by this question. After a few breaths, he straightened his back under Mu's half-smiley eyes. I am not here to pass on the message to you. I am definitely not afraid of death, absolutely not." Mu raised the corner of his mouth, and an inexplicable smile appeared. "In a sense, people like Fatty are the few wise men in the end times." Mu yawned out of boredom, and suddenly he noticed a breath of interest in the distance. "It's just right, let's go and see the performance of my disciples." A fierce battle was fought on the river bank several kilometers away. Hundreds of humans in guard uniforms held guns and spit flames at a mutant willow tree several meters high in front of them. They were all ordinary humans without superpowers, and were temporarily recruited into the guard team because of the generous treatment. Facing this mutant willow tree, they had no combat experience at all, and could only keep pulling the trigger in their hands, trying to defeat it with firepower. And the flexible branches of the mutant willow tree in front of them were already entangled with several shriveled human corpses. But the more they fought, the more panicked the guards looked. The overwhelming bullets hitting the iron-like trunk had no killing power. The seemingly pliant branches of the mutant willow tree were waving violently in the air like a storm whip. In just a few breaths, several human bodies were whipped away, bloody and bruised, and it was unknown whether they were alive or dead. This was actually an A-level mutant plant. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 186. Quick, focus fire on it. These guards who were temporarily summoned had little combat experience, and some old men in the guards commanded. Several guards carrying rocket launchers were about to pull the triggers when they heard this. But at this moment, the tall mutant willow tree in front of them seemed to have sensed it, and its huge body trembled. Several guards only felt the ground under their feet shaking violently. Suddenly, countless branches and vines surged out from the depths of the earth. The huge branches like tentacles instantly swept several guards carrying rocket launchers into the sky. The guards exclaimed and wailed, but the remaining guards were too late to rescue, and the branches of the mutant willow tree began to tremble. What is that? More than 100 guards looked up in panic, and saw countless pairs of scarlet pupils suddenly lit up in the dark of the lush branches and leaves of the willow tree. Then, a deafening cry came from the willow tree. A sea of black figures flew out from the lush branches of the willow tree. The heads of the guards suddenly became dark, and when they looked up, they saw black figures like dark clouds. It turned out to be countless black crows with scarlet eyes and flapping wings. The moment these black crows appeared, the air around them seemed to stagnate. There were continuous whoosh sounds of breaking through the air, and these black crows with murderous eyes swooped down towards the guards below. The guards pulled the trigger in panic, but the speed of these crows was so fast that it was difficult to aim the bullets at their flying trajectory. Countless bullets with sparks passed by these mutant crows, and it was impossible to stop these agile birds. In an instant, hundreds of ferocious crows fell on the ground like dense rain. The sharp and protruding beaks were shining with a strange luster, and they instantly poked bloody holes in the bodies of dozens of guards. The beaks of these crows were obviously mutated. There were also a few awakened ones with superpowers among the guards, but these low-level awakened ones had no way to deal with the overwhelming flying crows and the terrifying mutant willow trees. Just when everyone was at a loss, a clear and sharp shout from a young man suddenly came into their ears. Fire Fist! I saw that a ball of red flames rose from the air at some point and slammed towards the flying black crows. With a loud bang, dozens of crows were hit by the flames containing explosive energy, and their bodies fell to the ground with charred bodies. Some of the crows that were hit in the middle of the fire flapped their charred wings weakly, their eyes were closed, and they were obviously dead. Everyone looked over and saw a red-haired boy wearing goggles appearing hundreds of meters away from the lake. Next to the red-haired boy, there was a modified Jeep off-road vehicle with several girls getting off the vehicle. A brown-haired squirrel jumped out of the shoulder of a girl in a floral short skirt. As soon as the brown-haired squirrel landed on the ground, its body grew rapidly. In the blink of an eye, its body became as big as a car, and its eyes were red as it flew towards the black crows in the air. Go, Niu Niu! With a light shout from the girl, a blue ball in her hand was thrown to the ground. A beam of light flashed, and a black iron bull that was several times larger than the mutant squirrel suddenly emerged. The iron bull had a metallic luster on its body, and it exuded a powerful aura that frightened the awakened in the guards. This was an A-level mutant beast. At the same time, several black crows on the periphery of the crows let out a shrill scream. A gray mist dispersed, and a cold girl in purple clothes and holding a long sword emerged from the gray mist. Its reinforcements. Seeing the amazing performance of Lin Feng and the other two, the guards just came back to their senses from the shock, and they all showed joy on their faces. The three people who appeared in the battle were Lin Feng's three students. As soon as the three appeared, the situation took a huge turn. Although there were many black crows that sprang out from the treetops, they were generally sea level and D level. The red-haired boy wore a metal glove full of high-tech mechanical feeling on each hand. When his mind moved, Lin Feng's hands suddenly burst into two balls of light yellow soft flames. Lin Feng's palms were facing down, and the soft flames spewed directly towards the ground. The recoil force of the sprayed flames instantly took Lin Feng into the sky. Then, Lin Feng, who was flying in the air, sprayed a light yellow soft flame backwards with one hand to stay in the air. With one hand forward, a deep red fierce flame burst out from the palm, and it was thrown towards the crows in front. Shueqianya, who was wearing a purple shirt, was more flexible. Relying on the gray fog composed of corpse chi, she kept moving through the crows. The long knife in her hand was cold and sharp, and every time she attacked, she would take the lives of several black crows. The guards on the ground also took this opportunity to shoot bullets at the black crows in the sky. In a few breaths, large pieces of black feathers floated in the air and fell. However, at this moment, the mutant willow tree rooted in the ground not far away suddenly moved. The treetops shook, and large pieces of yellow or green leaves shot out like bullets, targeting the guards on the ground. The originally soft branches and leaves seemed to have become assassination weapons at this moment. In an instant, more than a dozen humans were killed by the dense leaves, and blood was gushing. At this time, the extended branches also wrapped around the mutant iron bull that rushed to the ground. Although the mutant iron bull with a black back was also at the A level, its ferocity was greatly reduced after being subdued. In comparison, its supernatural energy was far less profound than that of the mutant willow tree. The two were far behind in terms of hard power. The branches of the willow tree seemed slender and fragile, but when these vines were wrapped around the body of the iron bull, they became extremely tough. A huge force came from the branches, instantly wrapping the iron bull in the air and throwing it far away. After crashing into several large trees in succession, the huge body of the iron bull stopped. Standing up, the bull's head shook, but with its hard body, it was not seriously injured. The iron bull trampled with its limbs and was about to charge, but the ground under its feet cracked, and countless branches wrapped around the limbs of the iron bull again. The same trick was used again. Tai Niu was frustrated. This time, his eyes were burning with anger, and his muscles were strong as he tried to forcefully break through these tough branches. However, a scene that no one expected appeared. In the sky, countless black crows gathered together, a dark tide surged, and a strong wind swept. I saw that the dense and surging black crows gradually gathered into a huge black crow in the air. This black crow, which was formed by hundreds of black crows, had broad wings and a faint dark red color on its feathers. A violent energy erupted from its body, which was shocking. The level of this black crow has actually reached the A level. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xian Yu. Chapter 187. As soon as the black crow appeared, it swooped down towards the mutant iron bull entangled by branches in the air as if with a purpose. The sharp beak flashed with cold light, and the black crow's bloodthirsty eyes became deeper. When the black crow overlapped with the body of the iron bull, the sharp bird beak like a sharp weapon collided with the black and strong bull body, and a sound of golden swords clashing came. The iron bull screamed immediately, and even as strong as it was, a bloody hole was broken in its back. The branches wrapped around the body took this opportunity to pierce the wound of the iron bull. The branches of the willow tree instantly became swollen, and after absorbing some of the essence of the iron bull's flesh and blood, they suddenly pulled its huge body away. The black crow's situation was even more tragic. After colliding with the iron bull, the bird's beak was directly broken. Black blood flowed out of the wound like a broken thread, and even the energy around it was weakened a lot. However, the next second, the huge dark red crow disintegrated directly in mid-air. In a flash, countless black crows flapped their wings and appeared in the air again, covering the sky with a dark mass. Monster, monster! The many guards on the ground were dumbfounded. One mutant willow tree is already troublesome enough, and now there are so many mutant crows. How can they fight? Request support, request support. A guard picked up the communication device in his hand and called frantically, intending to ask for help from the surrounding teams. But in such a critical situation, it is obvious that they can't wait for new reinforcements. The next moment, the branches and roots of the willow tree extending underground and the overwhelming swift black crows attacked the guards on the ground. How can the guard team, which is mostly ordinary humans, withstand the deadly attacks from all directions? In an instant, the guards' miserable howling and screaming resounded around the lake. Even Lin Feng and the other two could only protect themselves in this intensive attack. It was a dream to deal with these astonishing numbers of black crows at once. Get rid of that tree first. The three students could see that the mutant willow tree was the leader of all the black crows. They immediately turned their attack momentum to the huge willow tree standing by the lake. Next to the off-road vehicle by the lake, Yuichi, who was wearing a white dress, stared blankly at the dense black crows in the sky, and looked at Lin Feng and the other two who were fighting with the willow tree from time to time. On the roof of the car, a girl in a red dress sat quietly on it, holding her delicate little face and looking at the people fighting in front with interest, as if everything happening here had nothing to do with her. The strange thing was that many mutant crows flew around, but none of them dared to approach the off-road vehicle. It was as if they were afraid of something. Lin Feng and his two companions had been fighting with the mutant willow tree for a long time, but the gap between the strength of B level and A level was too big. Even though the three of them were very talented, they still couldn't do anything to this huge mutant plant. At this moment, the seriously injured mutant iron bull stood up at some point, and stomped its hooves on the ground. When seriously injured, the fierce look of a terrifying heretic finally appeared in the eyes of the iron bull. With sharp horns and a straight body, it rushed towards the mutant willow tree. Several branches rose from the ground in an attempt to stop it, but the defense collapsed under the fierce impact of the iron bull. With a sudden impact, the iron bull broke a big hole in the trunk of the mutant willow tree. The latter twisted his body in pain and slammed the iron bull into the air. The iron bull rolled on the ground again and again, his limbs were worn out, and blood kept flowing from the wounds, and he had no fighting power at all. Su Wen's armored giant bull finally injured the mutant willow tree at the cost of serious injuries. Seeing the situation getting increasingly serious, Lin Feng's face showed a tangled look. Finally, Lin Feng seemed to have made up his mind, and looked at the two companions beside him with a firm look. If I lose control and run away, you must stay away from me and contact the teacher to save me. After saying that, Lin Feng secretly took off the ball in the center of the X glove, which was the fundamental device to confine the runaway energy in his body. The next second, Lin Feng closed his eyes tightly, and attracted the hot and violent flame energy buried in his body. At the same time, countless thick branches around him entangled towards Lin Feng. Just when the branches were about to touch Lin Feng's eyes suddenly opened. A touch of red light flashed in Lin Feng's eyes, and a hot and violent fire broke out around Lin Feng. The temperature of the air seemed to increase a few degrees under this scorching high temperature. In an instant, the countless tentacles like branches entangled around Lin Feng were burned by this scorching flame. The mutant willow tree hurriedly tried to retract the broken branches, but the flames actually burned along with the burning branches. Hey, this flame! Qin Mendi, who was watching from a distance, was originally bored with this disparity in the battle. But when she saw the flames bursting out of Lin Feng, she let out a surprised cry. Looks familiar, right? A familiar voice suddenly came from behind, and Qin Mendi and Yu Qi turned their heads. But they saw Mu Qiu appearing in the air at some point, standing with his hands behind his back, looking at the scene in front with a smile on his face. Brother! Qiu! The two girls looked at Miuchiu excitedly. The latter shook his head, raised a finger in front of his lips and made a gesture of silence. The good show has just begun. Lin Feng, who was surrounded by a crimson flame in the distance, had his eyes filled with red. The red-haired boy put his hands together at his waist, and a hot and explosive flame wave condensed at his waist and abdomen. As the color of the flame in the boy's palm became deeper, the energy bursting from Lin Feng's body also rose rapidly. In an instant, the energy bursting from Lin Feng's body reached the A level. Roar! The boy suddenly let out a beast-like roar, and his palm suddenly pushed forward at this moment. A beam of crimson flame light burst out from Lin Feng's hand, instantly breaking through the sky and shooting towards the direction of the mutant willow tree. The surrounding air became extremely dry under the burning of the fire column. Although the mutant willow tree has many flexible branches and huge power, it is still rooted in the ground in the final analysis, and its body is restricted and cannot move at all. The mutant willow tree can only drive all branches to weave a giant net in front of it, intending to block this burning blow. With a loud bang, the hot fire column bombarded the mutant willow tree. In an instant, the huge mutant willow tree was burned and devoured by the fire column, black slag drifted, and the air was filled with the smell of burning. When the willow tree was burned, countless black crows flying in the sky also scattered. Lin Feng, who was exhausted, staggered to the ground and was picked up by a guard. Feeling the energy in the depths of his soul that was about to run away, Lin Feng hurriedly embedded the ball back into the X-glove. Most of the energy in his body was drawn away by the all-out attack just now. Lin Feng's vision was blurred. He had never felt so weak in his body. And, is it over? The surviving guards looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief. They didn't expect that a teenager could defeat the terrifying mutant willow tree alone. No, that's not right. It's not over yet. In the crowd, a perception-shaped awakener seemed to feel something and looked at the lake beside him in panic. There was an even stronger energy wave coming from there. Oh! Even Miuchiu, who was standing by, looked at the calm lake, with an unexpected look of interest on his face. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 188. Just as the raging fire burned all the mutated willow trees, the billowing smoke filled the lake with haze. Suddenly, the originally calm lake surface became choppy, the water rippled and the bubbles bubbled. Biting icy cold air emanated from the lake, instantly freezing the high temperature generated by Lin Feng's scorching flames. The surrounding temperature instantly turned from scorching hot to freezing point. An astonishing wave of energy suddenly erupted from the depths of the lake. There was only a loud pop sound, and above the lake, the calm water rose directly to a height of hundreds of meters. A huge figure jumped up from the bottom of the lake with an irresistible, terrifying momentum. The moment this huge figure jumped up from the bottom of the lake, even the surface of the lake where it lived was frozen into a sheet of ice by the biting low temperature. As the huge figure leaped to the ground, the black crows that had originally dispersed gathered together again, becoming even more ferocious. It was cold and gloomy, and everyone finally saw clearly the true face of the monster in the lake. This turned out to be a huge toad with a blue body, a milky white belly, and strong limbs. The blue toad has wart-like dark protrusions on its back, its cheeks are bulging, and its pupils are closed with a cold indifference. The ground touched by the blue toad's double webs also turned into ice in an instant, and the energy fluctuations emitted from its body were filled with a chill. This is an elemental heretic that has reached S level. This is. Before many of the surviving guards could react, the ice toad that appeared by the lake moved first. I saw its cheeks bulging, its pupils blinking slightly, and a long scarlet tongue spitting out of its mouth. The long tongue spit out from the ice toad's mouth is like a retractable spring tentacle. With a whoosh sound, the long tongue wrapped around a guard's body in an instant, and then contracted and rebounded in the blink of an eye. The guard didn't even have time to scream in agony before he was swallowed whole by the ice toad. Hurry up and fire. This time someone finally reacted in time, and a dozen guards hurriedly picked up the rocket launcher tubes scattered around. Without daring to hesitate, he immediately pulled the trigger on the huge figure in front of him. A series of loud noises were heard, and a dozen cannons with smoke tails were bombarded in the direction of the ice toad. What followed was an overwhelming barrage of bullets. Facing the frontal attack of countless artillery fire, the ice toad remained motionless. It was seen that its figure paused, its cheeks were slightly deflated, and a ball of ice blue mist suddenly spewed out of its mouth. Immediately afterwards, a scene that shocked everyone happened. The overwhelming artillery fire and bullets were fired in front of the ice toad, but they were shrouded in icy blue mist. In an instant, they were all frozen into ice cubes and stagnated in the air. Then there was a series of click-click sounds of ice cubes falling to the ground, which shocked the eyes of all the guards. But the ice toad did not stop at all, spitting out its long tongue, and in the blink of an eye, a panicked guard was swallowed by it. The black crows entrenched in the sky also frantically launched a suicide attack on the guards below. Suddenly, many human beings who had just experienced a war and were exhausted physically and mentally were once again in desperate situation. The armor giant bull summoned by Su Wen had been seriously injured in the previous battle with the mutated willow tree and the ink crow. The mutant squirrels and geese who also participated in the battle were also scarred and had no fighting power. Shwekanya, wearing a purple shirt, shuttled among the black crows. At this time, she was already tired. In just a few minutes, a large number of humans have been killed by the monster. Damn. On the ground, Lin Feng, who was being supported by someone, was breathing heavily, looking at the huge and cold ice toad in the distance. Is that the only way to use it? Lin Feng's body was already extremely weak, but the situation in front of him was extremely urgent. At the critical moment, Lin Feng broke away from the support of the people around him, but a more powerful flame gradually burst out from his body. If Lin Feng had already touched the shackles in his body when he fought against the mutated willow tree before. So what he is doing now is to completely liberate the violent energy hidden in his body. Many guards did not notice that as Lin Feng moved forward, a fiery red crystal gradually appeared on his forehead, as if the energy crystal core of the zombie heresy. In the blink of an eye, Lin Feng's eyes became violent and bloodthirsty, his limbs fell to the ground, and his whole body was on fire. At this moment, the out-of-control flame monster appeared again. Oh! Doesn't Dyer know any other information about the heterogeneous religion? On the roof of the off-road vehicle next to the lake, Mu Chiu's eyes narrowed slightly, and next to him was a girl in a red dress with a confused look on her face. Qin Mendi shook his head gently and said, "That heterogeneous sect only sent someone to contact me once and promised to occupy a certain territory in the city. The price is that a certain number of souls will be dedicated to Dyer every month." According to Dyer's description, there are indeed many mysteries about the alien religion, which makes her, a destructive level existence, quite fearful. What role will the mysterious heterogeneous church play in this battle codenamed Redemption? It's worth looking forward to. Mu Chiu nodded slightly, then turned to look at the huge figure that was sending out chills not far away. A gleam flashed in his eyes. Mu Chiu has not encountered an elemental heresy for a long time. What's more, the toad in front of him has the ice attribute that is extremely compatible with his ability. I believe that after swallowing it, it can bring a certain improvement to his ice ability. Brother, are you interested in that big guy? Dyer sat on the roof of the car, swinging her jade feet beside the car, looking up at Mu Chiu. As long as Mu Chiu wants, she can take the life of the toad at any time. Dyer, help brother get rid of it. Mu Chiu heard this, rubbed Dyer's head, and smiled. No, it still has something I want. The black clothes fluttered behind him, and Mu Chiu looked up at the behemoth in the distance. I'll go get it myself. Beside the freezing lake, a monster with flames all over its body and double horns on its head was fighting with another huge toad. No, it's better to say that it's a one-sided beating by the ice toad than a battle. No matter how the fire monster incarnated by Lin Feng attacked, it couldn't hurt the ice toad at all. The scorching flame was extinguished before it got close to the toad. The gap in strength between the two sides was too great. Lin Feng, covered in flames, dragged a long tail behind him, using all four limbs, like a wild beast in the jungle. He flew towards the ice toad with his burning body, but the latter didn't care. The long scarlet tongue was exposed, wrapped in a gloomy chill, and instantly blew the flame monster that Lin Feng had transformed into to the ground. The bone-chilling coldness gradually weakened the flames radiating from Lin Feng's body, and at the same time, it also consumed his only trace of reason. His body seemed to fall apart, every cell was overloaded, and every movement was tearing his muscles. Lin Feng knew that his body could no longer hold on. A narrow and sharp ice spike condensed in the mouth of the ice toad, and pierced Lin Feng's head in a flash. The cold wind was biting in his ears, and Lin Feng struggled to get up, but he couldn't support this broken body. He could only watch the deadly ice spikes radiating a deadly threat continue to grow in his eyes. At the critical moment, the cone-like spike suddenly exploded in the air and exploded into a pile of powder. A familiar black windbreaker blocked Lin Feng's sight. Then, a tall back came into view. Feeling the familiar figure appear in front of him, that free and easy aura can no longer be imitated by anyone. Lin Feng's face full of ferocious and fierce expression was difficult to put on a smile of joy. "Teacher, you are here. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord." Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 189. Several modified armored vehicles were speeding along the decaying city streets, and the hum of their engines seemed to be the main color of this neighborhood. What's even more weird is that many armored vehicles are led by an ordinary van in front. Finally, after driving several kilometers, a group of vehicles stopped on the embankment not far from the lake. Ji Yufeng, Ji Yu, Lu Qianqian and other familiar faces to Mu Qiu walked out of the armored vehicle with many awakened people. In the van, the fat man and several students hurriedly got out of the van, ran to Ji Yufeng and said, "Captain Ji, the place where they sent the distress signal is right ahead." Everyone looked up and could faintly see the dark crowd of crows in the sky by the lake, and could also feel a powerful energy wave. A middle-aged man next to Ji Yufeng said, "You can't be wrong, he is an S-class heretic." Ji Yu used her powers at this time, and a burst of silvery white light emerged from her pupils. This is her special ability called Silver Eyes, which has outstanding miraculous effects in discerning the enemy's weaknesses and conducting reconnaissance. At the lakeside under the embankment, she saw a group of black crows and a terrifying aura that made her palpitate. Ji Yu spoke out about the scene she saw. "That's an S-level ice toad. The average level of the black crow in the sky is around sea level. There are some guardsmen by the lake, and..." Suddenly, a figure wearing a black robe and a handsome face appeared in front of Ji Yu. After hearing her words, she said, "And Mu Qiu is there too." Somehow, the moment Ji Yu saw Mu Qiu, a strange blush flew over her pretty face. "Bing Jun is here too." Before many awakened people could recover, Ji Yufeng suddenly waved his hand. "Go down first and then talk." "Teacher, you are here." Lin Feng used his last bit of reason to speak to the man in front of him. At this moment, violent thoughts were constantly echoing in his mind. Lin Feng knew that he would return to the wild beast-like state again soon. "Bing Jun, it's Bing Jun. Master Bing Jun is here, we are saved." The humans present looked ecstatic when they saw Mu Qiu's figure. "Teacher." Su Wen and Shueqianya also became happy when they saw Mu Qiu. No matter what time it was, having Miu appear always made them feel extremely at ease. Miu had an indifferent smile on her face, turned to look at Lin Feng behind her and said, "Well done, Xiao Linzi." Teacher. The familiar title reached Lin Feng's ears, but it sounded extremely vague to Lin Feng. He could already feel that the beast in his body was about to devour him and turn into the violent and bloodthirsty flame monster. Roar. Veins popped up on his forehead, Lin Feng roared uncontrollably, and the flame crystal core between his eyebrows was about to turn into substance. Zhen Zhen. Miu smacked her mouth twice, then flicked the looming fiery red crystal core on Lin Feng's forehead with her fingers. In an instant, it was as if a basin of cold water was poured over his head. Lin Feng's spirit was suddenly shaken, and the crazily burning flames on his body also subsided in an instant. At this moment, a glimmer of humanity flashed across the ice toad's pupils. The big mouth opened, and ice bullets condensed with cold energy were condensed in the mouth. As its long tongue rolled, they were all shot towards Miu's back. The sound of breaking through the air came from my ears, and the ice bullet was shot out through the long tongue at a speed no slower than that of a firearm. However, just when countless ice bullets were about to hit Miu's back, a thick ice wall suddenly formed behind Miu. Ice bullets rained down on the ice wall, but none of them could penetrate it. It's also the power of the ice element. Widowed. There was finally a hint of fear in the ice toad's pupils, and he let out a strange cry that made no sense. Miu turned around with an extremely casual smile on her face. "Little frog, your powers are pretty good." Next, Ice Toad saw the human man in black robes slowly walking towards him from a distance. It swore it had never seen such a weird and sinister smile. Strong ice energy emanated from the whole body, trying to stop the human man. But the latter didn't show any sign of stopping. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the ice toad no longer chooses to sit still and wait for death. This time it wants to take the initiative. I saw that its seemingly bloated and huge body was actually quite flexible, and it could fly dozens of meters in one leap. In the blink of an eye, the ice toad had already jumped in front of Miu. The former spit out a large amount of ice mist from his mouth, and at the same time, his long scarlet tongue shot out like a bullet. The ice mist that blows like the wind alone is enough to freeze hundreds of humans. At the same time, countless black crows in the sky gathered again and transformed into a huge, ink-colored crow with dark red fur. As soon as the A-level dark red ink crow gathered together, it swooped down in the direction of Miu. The howling cold wind blew by, and the close-fitting robes of the surrounding humans became somewhat solidified. But then, a scene that stunned everyone happened. Miu didn't know when she rose into the sky. Under her feet, there was a column of ice. The ice mist released by the giant toad had long since disappeared. And in the center of that pillar of ice, there was a long scarlet tongue frozen. Miu actually stepped on the tip of the ice toad's ejected tongue. What's even more terrifying is that as Miu taps her toes, the ice that freezes the long scarlet tongue continues to spread along the base of the tongue. In an instant, the huge and powerful ice toad was frozen into a ball of ice sculpture. With ice, freeze ice. Miu raised his head slightly to look at the dark red ink crow swooping towards him, and breathed a sigh of relief. A layer of mist-like blue mist was seen floating in Miu's hand, and in the blink of an eye it had condensed into an ice spear. He casually threw it towards the sky, and the ice spear with a strong momentum actually penetrated the huge ink crow directly. Immediately, the ice gun detonated in Moya's body, bursting into brilliant ice flowers in an instant. Mo Crow's combined body couldn't withstand the strong ice energy, and instantly exploded in the air together with countless ice particles. At this point, the terrifying crows that plagued countless human survivors were defeated by Miu with one blow. Everyone looked up at the black-robed figure standing in the sky, as if standing on an ice cliff in the north, with awe in their eyes. "Is that, Haya-kun?" Ji Yufeng and other rescue teams also arrived at this moment, and happened to see Mu Qiu crushing countless monsters, and the shock in his eyes could not be greater. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 190. A strange autumn wind with a slight chill blew over, blowing on the stunned faces of everyone. In the dark night, Mu Qiu stood on the frozen long tongue of the ice toad with a calm expression. Then, Mu Qiu walked towards the toad that was frozen into an ice sculpture without haste. Everyone could clearly see that the pupils of the huge toad were trembling violently, and there was a strong energy fluctuation bursting out from the ice sculpture. Finally, after Mu Qiu walked to the ice sculpture only a few dozen meters away, the ice wrapped around the ice toad made a loud explosion. Countless ice fragments scattered, and then a huge figure flashed in the air. Everyone looked closely and found that the huge figure passing through the air was the ice toad that had just brought them great pressure. At this moment, the body of the ice toad was full of traces of frostbite, and there were several narrow wounds cut by ice on its white belly. There was a sense of shrinking in the movements, which was completely different from the powerful and terrifying monster before. It was fear. This S-level heretic of the element of terror actually felt fear. The ice toad leaped into the air with all its strength, and its pupils were filled with fear. The monsters at their level have a natural sensitivity to dangerous things. The moment it was frozen by the human man just now, even this heretic monster with the same ice element felt a chill deep into its bones. Escape. This is the only thought in the ice toad's mind now. Although the ice toad is huge, its reaction speed is extremely flexible. It has already leaped hundreds of meters into the air with its limbs gathering strength. Like a huge shot put, the ice toad's target location is the deep lake bottom not far away. The pupils of the toad with the dark blue body shrank slightly. As long as it could jump into the depths of the vast lake, no matter how strong the man in black was, he could not do anything to it. So, all the humans present saw the powerful ice toad that had jumped out from the depths of the lake before and jumped back to the bottom of the lake in an extremely embarrassed posture. The whole process happened in the blink of an eye. On the contrary, Mu Qiu, who was wearing a black robe and was named Ice King, still had a leisurely smile on his face. It was not until the huge ice toad jumped into the bottom of the lake and rolled up a large wave that Mu Qiu stopped. Could it be that this Ice King also feared this fierce elemental heretic? Just when countless people were secretly suspicious, the ground around Mu Qiu suddenly whistled. Looking up, everyone's eyes became extremely shocked. On Mu Qiu's back, a pair of extremely wide ice wings like an angel suddenly condensed. The wings were made of ice, and the feathers were clearly full, and you could even clearly see the transparent crystal veins on them. The fresh ice wings fluttered and lifted Mu Qiu up to the sky in an instant. Mu Qiu's face was clear, his eyes narrowed, and there was always a faint smile on the corners of his mouth. Flying in the air above the clear lake, the lake was so deep that you couldn't see the bottom, and the huge ice toad was nowhere to be found. Ice Lord, what are you going to do? Countless people stared at the scene in a daze, with puzzled expressions on their faces. Did Mu Qiu want to go deep into the bottom of the lake to chase? The scene that happened next shocked everyone present. The ice wings behind Mu Qiu fluttered, and he slowly stretched out his arms. A crystal blue mist appeared in the air. The frost gradually gathered in the air into an ancient, crystal blue ice longbow. Mu Qiu held the longbow in his left hand, pulled the dazzling dark blue bowstring with his right hand, and fluttered his wings behind him, like a god. A terrifying energy that made people shudder and tremble with the boundless coldness from the north swept in all directions. The ice blue beam gradually enlarged at the bowstring. Just when the bowstring was pulled into a crescent in Mu Qiu's hand, the air around him seemed to freeze at this moment. Suddenly, a sound as fast as lightning reached everyone's ears. A dazzling ice blue beam shot out from the bowstring, and the extreme coldness even left a narrow hollow ice column in the air. This arrow froze time and space. This amazing ice blue beam shot into the lake in an instant and penetrated the bottom of the lake. In an instant, the deep blue bottom of the lake was illuminated by a dazzling blue light. "Quick, look there!" First, one person exclaimed, and then countless humans saw that from the center of the lake bottom where the ice arrow shot in, groups of frost condensed rapidly like blooming flowers. Immediately afterwards, with the lake bottom below Muchu as the center, large areas of frost began to spread and condense on the lake surface. In just a few breaths, the lakeside within a radius of several kilometers was covered with frost, and even the dam in the distance was frozen. Everywhere you look, there is a glacier. At this moment, a loud noise suddenly came from the lake that was frozen into an ice surface. There was a loud explosion somewhere in the center of the lake, and a giant toad with half of its body frozen jumped out from the bottom of the lake. Lonely. The toad's pupils were full of horror, and its limbs and flippers were frozen at the root the moment it left the lake. The bottom of the lake was completely occupied by frost, and it had nowhere to hide. This strange icy energy can actually freeze this S-level existence that is also an ice element. However, at the moment when the ice toad jumped up, a black figure suddenly appeared above its head. This black figure seemed so small in front of the huge body of the toad, but it instantly made the pupils of the ice toad widen. The crystal wings fluttered behind him, and the wind whistled. Muchu's palm stood on the toad's head and pushed forward suddenly. A visible light blue air wave rippled from Muchu's palm like a ripple. The huge ice toad's body turned into a ball of ice in an instant. Then, there was a crackling sound. Under the impact of the strong waves, the frozen body of the toad was instantly shaken into a ball of gorgeous ice crystal powder. In the crowd, someone's throat choked and a sound of swallowing saliva was clearly audible. "Yufeng, can you do it like him?" The middle-aged man next to Ji Yufeng was also shocked by Muchu's ability and couldn't help asking. Ji Yufeng stared at the black-clothed figure on the lake that looked like a god, and shook his head slowly. He might be able to get rid of this tricky elemental heretic after a fight with his spatial ability. But he could never eliminate it as easily as Muchu. Just then, the intercom on Ji Yufeng's chest suddenly rang. Ji Yufeng took it calmly, and a noisy voice came from the intercom. After a while, Ji Yufeng said, "Okay, we'll go there." Putting down the intercom, Ji Yufeng once again looked at Muchu in the air with indifference. The latter seemed to have noticed it, turned around and looked at him with a smile in his eyes.